Rob J gave me an incredibly generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon and brings you today's video. Alela versus Chatterfang, Kaiga and Niv-Mizzet Reborn. Pretty good starter, thanks to that Myriad Landscape. We can grab some blue mana, so let's keep this. Once again, we've got the Kindred Discovery. Kindred Discovery always seems to show up in this deck, and it always does a lot of work, so we'll see if our opponents are going to deal with it this video. We'll start off with the Myriad Landscape coming into play tapped here, because we can go straight in for a Sol Ring next turn and crack that thing. Drew into a Mystical Tutor. Just some tap lands in for my opponent. We draw into another Fairy, this time in Tegwyl. So we'll fix a couple of our opponent's black mana. Don't think they're going to be struggling on that anyway. And we know that we're getting into the Sol Ring and continuing to fix our colours, this time with blue, thanks to the Myriad Landscape. Alright, so what we could do is go for Mystical Tutor during our upkeep for a Fierce Guardianship and then get down our commander next turn. And then it will be ready for swinging in with a Kindred Discovery, and we can try and protect that with the counter magic. So that's the loose plan at the moment. Maybe not. Artifact Mutation, immediately blowing up the Sol Ring. Sapphire Medallion from Kaiga. Alright, so I'm thinking this Niv-Mizzet Reborn deck is going to be pretty spiky, so let's go for the Mystical Tutor now so that we can get this free counter magic going. And we'll throw in the Tegwyl into play, I think. So here we are going after the free counter spell, and that will allow us into the Mutavault, which will tap for black if we need it to, and get down the Tegwyl like I said. The Saproling from the Artifact Mutation goes in towards the blue player. Heuristic Study comes in for the blue player, followed by a Maze of Ith, which does tap for mana if our opponent needs it to, thanks to our Urborg. Assassin's Trophy, and we're seeing the 2 mana removal this game. Assassin's Trophy goes on to the Heuristic Study, and not going to pay the tax on that, so they get at least 1 card from it. Noteworthy that there is a Blighted Cataract over here as well. So is the blue player now holding up counter magic thanks to the island from the Assassin's Trophy. Green Sun Zenith going for X is 1 to search up a green creature, and it's a Gilded Goose our opponent's aimed for. Obviously make tokens with that. Okay, and into another tutor in the Vamp Tutor, so I think we try to stick our commander here. Might not be able to get it through the blue player, but we'll try. Our opponent is holding up priority over here, which is noteworthy, but that is allowed into play. So let's swing in towards the Niv-Mizzet player, who took out our Sol Ring previously, and we do get to goad the Saproling token, not that it'll matter with so few creatures in play. The Saproling does have to swing in thanks to it being goaded, so it goes down the middle. The Maze of Ith stops it from turning in sideways, untaps it, and removes it from combat. Following that up with a Mystical Tutor is Kaiga. A Mind Stone now for the blue player who searched up a Fact or Fiction with the tutor and can afford that quite easily. And then during Chatterfang's turn we see a Jaheira, so we'll hopefully be able to start making foods and treasures and actually be able to get into some mana over there. 6 cards in hand and only 2 lands by turn 5. Could go for Vamp Tutor again during the upkeep, but I'd rather hold on to stuff and hope for a land here. Okay, Mithril Coat isn't the worst thing to play during an opponent's turn, so if we don't feel as though we want to go for Snap, we can hold up Vamp Tutor, Fierce Guardianship and Mithril Coat. So we'll go to the left with Tegwyl again, and we'll show that we're spreading the damage around and go for Alela to the right, unfortunately without the Kindred Discovery in play. And we'll go for Jaheira being goaded by the Alela. Obviously Saproling is goaded as well. And now Niv-Mizzet doing something at the end of our turn. 6 cards in hand over there as well. That is an utter end. I'm assuming that this is going to be round full of spot removal from our opponent. Yeah, that could be a means of us refilling our hand with this, but I don't think it's worth using the Fierce Guardianship on. Our opponent might be baiting us. I think we allow that. Don't really want to lose the Tegwyl, because if we can manage to get a bunch of fairies into play, it's good wrath protection, but I don't know, maybe we'll be able to stick the Kindred Discovery and get some good card draw out of that. Our opponents obviously know that we have this in hand thanks to the clause on the Mystical Tutor. Looks like he wants to play at instant speed as well, so continuing to make land drops. We missed our land unfortunately. Good thing that we got into that Mystical or Myriad Landscape previously. Saproling swings in down the middle again. Commander seems to become less and less of a creature-based format, and yeah, so I'm not sure how useful goading is going to be in these. What I assume is going to be a higher power game. Maybe could have gone for Vamp Tutor on my opponent's turn there to maximise the number of tokens that we're getting into. We see a terrain generator over here, and our opponent played this turn a Riptide Laboratory into a Sky Diamond, obviously wanting to ramp into his commander. Noteworthy didn't go for the Fact or Fiction, so why don't we attempt the Vampiric Tutor now, see if our opponent wants to counter it. Maybe it can just be an Ancient Tomb here, if we're going to continue to struggle to get into colours. We don't necessarily have to take life to the Ancient Tomb thanks to Urborg, otherwise I'd probably go for the Mana Crypt, but we can tap this down for black, so we'll put an Ancient Tomb on top. Do not have Cabal Coffers in the deck. Chatterfang comes into play. That is only the second commander to hit play by turn 5 over here, soon to be our turn 6. And the Jaheira does have to swing in, the blue player not getting down any creatures like we said, so he's going to have to start taking some hits if he's not careful, thanks to our goad. Maze of Ith being used on that thing. So at the end of the turn we'll go after this Mithril Coat now. This will be the first spell that we cast during this turn, so gets us into another fairy. And that successfully lands on our commander. I imagine this player will have plenty of exiles still to try and get rid of the Alela. But we do know what we're drawing into, so that can be Ancient Tomb. And I'll take the life here because it'll make my opponents think twice about us having black mana held up. But let's attempt to get down a Kindred Discovery because that'll start really drawing us into cards. Probably worth a counter spell to let this land. It is allowed to land, so we name Fairy and we've got 3 fairies we can swing in with here. And now the blue player going after something. That's an evacuation, so yeah, kind of have to go for the Fierce Guardianship on that and hope that Niv Mizzet doesn't have something. We're making our opponents use their interaction at least. Alright, so we'll go Alela down the middle, Fairy Rogue to the left, and one to the right as well. So that triggers the Kindred Discovery 3 times, so we get to draw 3 cards. That's not bad for 5 mana. Managed to draw into a land as well that we can get down this turn. Got us into another free spell as well in Deadly Rollick. Noteworthy our opponent let the damage through the Gilded Goose onto the Fairy Rogue, so was maybe worried about some kind of Death Touch or something. We'll go after the Jaheira again, being goaded. Alright, so we don't have a means of protecting our board now, unfortunately, and it would have been nice to get down the Dimir Aqueduct here. Obviously we've made a land already, so yeah, it allowed us into the Kindred Discovery, which is relevant. But our mana's still a little bit janky. A Baleful Strix gets down a Death Touching Bird, which is relevant against us. Saproling landing damage on the blue player this time. And now Renin 6 coming into play after the attack. And dealing 1 damage to a Fairy Rogue token. We can make another one with the Deadly Rollick. Gonna wait until this player's turn in order to do that though. Might as well get maximum information on the board. Alright, it's a Blatant Thievery from our opponent, so stealing the Planeswalker, our commander, and the Jaheira. So do we have to exile our own creature here? We'll get a card draw from the Kindred Discovery at least. Yeah, I suppose so. We'll make a fairy on the way out. Draws us into a Wretched Confluence. Our opponent successfully gaining control of the Renin 6. Not gaining control of this for whatever reason. But anyway, managing to take down a fairy token with the Planeswalker. We'll be able to take that out with one of our own fairies next turn. And now finally seeing the Fact or Fiction from our opponent that he tutored for a while ago. So choosing from some lands, a Blue Sun Zenith and a Telemin Performance. And it's the Chatterfang player that is being allowed to choose here. So this is how the piles have been decided here. I personally put Ancient Tomb in the bottom there as well, just to give an island and a Blue Sun Zenith to my opponent, because yeah, maximising the amount of mana that you give into him with a big X spell, and he does need his hand refilling. Might have been an argument to just give him no lands whatsoever and the Blue Sun Zenith. Nested Shambler, when it dies, creates some squirrel tokens. And following that up with a Skull Clamp, I was going to say there's no means of him sacrificing that, but there is now. So putting it onto the Shambler, that will draw him a couple of cards and make a squirrel token. Or actually it'll be a couple of tokens, won't it, because it had +1 to its power when it died. So yeah, a couple of squirrel tokens and then a couple more from the Chatterfang. These come in tapped, but they will tap for mana next turn as long as this thing stays in play. And the 2/3 turns in straight down the middle at the blue player, ignoring the Planeswalker. Yeah, so trying to encourage us to swing in towards it. Alright, Chatterfang going at us. Alright, a Rhystic Study for us now. Can draw us some cards. Yeah, the mana's so clunky. If this was an untapped land, we could go for... it would be 4 mana into the Talion, and then play a Rhystic Study. I'm not going to replay my commander here, I don't think, until we've got a surplus of mana, because I'd like to equip this onto it in the same turn, probably. And we'll draw a card to the Talion, maybe we can get an untapped land, because we'll obviously draw a card from the Kindred Discovery here. The Niv Mizzet Perun player is deciding whether or not to allow this into play. It is allowed into play, so we have to choose between 2 and 3 here, I think. I think I'm going to plump for 2, which is typically what I go for with Talion. And alright, that draws us into our Fetid Pools, which is a tap land, so... yeah, we're just holding up Snap and the Consider, I think. So let's go Dimir Aqueduct. Bounce an island back to hand. We could always animate the Mutavault and draw another card with that. But I think I'm fine with holding up the Snap, just in case something relevant happens there. Nah, actually, I'm going to animate the Mutavault. If it dies, then so be it. It maximises the number of cards we can draw here. Just take both of these in towards the Wrenn and 6, just in case something gets taken out. That is a Frantic Search, and Sword of the Animist. If we can manage to take a turn off of that, then that might be relevant. Alright, so with 8 cards in hand now, I think we'll just have to discard the Fetid Pools, and like I say, hope for Sword of the Animist being relevant, and hope to get down cards like Fetid Pools in the early game so that we don't have to play tap lands. I haven't drawn into any fetches though, unfortunately. So next turn we can play and equip Sword of the Animist, and then we'll still have 4 mana held up. So I might just get down the Rhystic Study, and then the turn after we can finally get down our commander again. We'll have started making lands consistently, hopefully, and we'll at least be able to go for our commander and hold up Frantic Search and Snap and Consider, stuff like that, start making some tokens. But yeah, the decent amount of interaction this game has slowed us down more than previous videos. Alright, Casualties of War from our opponent now, so blowing up the Kindred Discovery is probably a good idea. Chatterfang going down, leaving this in play is noteworthy, so a surplus of mana next turn. And then it is a Sapphire Medallion and the Maze of Ith being blown up as well. So the removal tribal player still going strong, and the Saproling goes in down the middle. And we know of the Blue Sun Zenith in our opponent's hand. Alright, continuing to try and take our stuff. Corrupted Conscience this time. We will be able to bring it back with the Snap, so I don't know, maybe getting down our commander into a Snap next turn might be a better idea. Chatterfang being replayed again straight away thanks to the Squirrel tokens being allowed in. I would have taken out the Jaheira personally. And Chatterfang's ability is held up here, so we'll be able to get rid of anything of a decent toughness. Unless our opponent taps out here. Alright, looks like he is going for a Demonic Tutor, and yeah, the Callion remembers the number that we chose, so we'll draw our opponent a card instead. And draw another one during the Sword of the Animist being played next turn. And when we pounce it back with Snap. Alright, tutoring out a Gaia's Cradle means that our opponent now has a surplus of mana. This is all off the back of this being allowed in play. Taps down for 5. That is a Parallel Evolution. For each creature token on the battlefield, its controller creates a token copy of it. So we get another fairy, another Saproling over here, but our opponent's definitely going to benefit the most from this. Not whether he could have made a food token with the Gilded Goose if he'd wanted to. Might just want to hold up mana for the Skull Clamp though. And that's what he's doing, clamping some tap tokens, and following up with a Jeweled Lotus so he doesn't have to discard it to hand size. And then clamping again, so he's going to have 9 cards in hand. And swinging in at us with the Jaheira. Alright, now we could go for Snap on our turn for the Talion. Just drew into Bitter Blossom, which is relevant. Our opponent's about to draw a bunch with the Blue Sun Zenith anyway, so do we really need to mess about with our turn in order to get that back? Drop the island. I think we definitely need to get down Sword of the Animist, so yeah, that'll leave us with Bitter Blossom mana and Snap mana, so yeah, maybe we do just do it now. Keeps our opponent off 2 extra cards. Might encourage them to blow a turn on Blue Sun Zenith. So our opponent will have us all lose 2 life and he will draw a card. Oh, and I could have gained some mana there actually, totally forgot about the untap clause on the Snap. Yeah, I could have gained a couple of mana from the Ancient Tomb. Oh well, done now. Play the Sword of the Animus without drawing our opponent a card now. Our opponent cracks the Mind Stone in response. I think we're wanting to see a board wipe at this point, so it might be worth not playing too many creatures out because the Chatterfang's going off, but equipping the Sword of the Animus anyway, so then maybe we do go for 3 mana into a Frantic Search, untap these two, gives us 4 mana, so then we'll be able to go for Bitter Blossom and the Rhystic Study. Yeah, I think that's okay. We'll go through to combat first, and we'll swing in to the right, and if our opponent wants to block with the Goose, that's fine with me. But we will ramp, get another island out of our library. Only 4 basics left in the deck, don't have too many in this deck. Alright, so we'll go for the Frantic Search and try and untap a couple of lands. Obviously it'd be nice to be doing this during our opponent's turns with our commander in play, but doesn't seem to be panning out for us. Yeah, let's get rid of Consider, and I'll probably regret going for the Mistbind Click, but Wretched Confluence can draw us some cards if we need it, so I'll get rid of the Talisman against my better judgment. Untap the 2 lands that tap for 2 mana, as well as an island. So I'll tap the Ancient Tomb down for just 1 mana, and that will allow us into a Rhystic Study, and then another enchantment in the Bitter Blossom. Breeding Pool into play tapped from Niv-Mizzet, so just holding up 6 mana. Hopefully doesn't pay into the Rhystic Study. Alright, there's Niv-Mizzet Reborn for our opponent, 4 cards in hand, and as you would expect does pay into the Rhystic Study tax, so revealing to us here some lands, Sylvan Reclamation, a Decimate, and an Arcane Infusion. Oh, and there's a Vindicate as well revealed. Blue Sun Zenith being played for 4 mana, and we end up drawing into a Mana Crypt with that, thanks to the Rhystic Study, which might actually be relevant here. We could take Niv-Mizzet off a turn by going for the Vendilion Click. I mean, he's got instant speed stuff, but as long as we can hold off that Decimate, I'm going to be happy. Okay, and then the blue player just deciding to scoop it up out of the blue. 13 mana from the Gaia's Cradle. Another tutor from our opponent in Diabolic Intent this time. Not paying into it, surprisingly, so must be going for a big X spell, maybe. Are we just going to see a Crater Hoof win here? Yeah, not blowing this thing up instead of the Chatterfang really could have changed this game. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it's an overrun effect. Finale of Devastation. X is 11. Risky, our opponent letting us draw cards. Thankfully, thankfully for him, we don't draw into Force of Will. It is a Plumb the Forbidden this time. And our opponent had a Crater Hoof in hand, so used the Finale of Devastation to get down the Crater Hoof. So there's a bunch of 25 plus power creatures here, and we are well and truly done with this one. So yeah, great contrast between previous games and this one. This is what can happen when you see a lot of interaction in a game. Barely got to do anything with Alela, unfortunately. Had to use our counter magic to protect against all the interaction, and yeah, it's opened up the playing field for someone who was struggling on mana at first, which is interesting. But that is us done. Control players want to get into the late game really, and yeah, big smashy decks like this want to get it over and done with as soon as possible by ramping out, and our opponent has successfully managed to do that here, so it's a good game to my opponents. Makes it feel better as well that the Kega player quit out of nowhere. He was about to lose anyway, assuming that he didn't have counter magic held up. Alright, so we go down to minus 103, our opponent minus 164. So that's a Crater Hoof win, alright. Hope you all enjoyed it. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.